first sparked my interest in cars? Well, it was a TV show that hit the screens here in Britain in the 1950s, and it was called Highway Patrol. Plodding music, isn't it? And the scripts were rather plodding as well, but I didn't think about that when I was about 13 looking at this stuff. It was fantastic. There were cars with the big fins, police cars, tearing around corners, following the bad guys, leaning out and, you know, driving along and shooting bang, bang, bang at it. It was absolutely fantastic. In California this was shot. And the bad guys, war was caught in the end, of course, and often the bad guys were usually a man and a woman, and often the guy who was catching them, Captain Dan Matthews, played by Broderick Crawford, made sure that everything was under control. And at the end of the show, he came up with a little homily to say, "Don't drive fast. The faster you drive, the faster you'll get to the funeral parlour." Things like that they would say to make sure that people didn't sort of emulate them. I guess in America that was what maybe the sponsors said that, but I didn't bother about all that sort of stuff. But it was a fantastic thing to watch, and we used to look forward to it every week, my brother and I, looking at this thing. And in fact, from that time, I started to collect dinky toys of cars, and American cars particularly. But something happened that upset me a bit, and it's the only time I've been really envious, and that was next door to us lived somebody called Walmsley, Mr. Walmsley, and he ran what my mother called was a crackers up yard, but it's a car breaker's yard, and I was very envious because he had every sort of car in there, and he could go there and fiddle around, and I knew his son Morris because I was at school with him. But one day, Mr. Walmsley, who was doing well, decided that he needed a better car, and to accommodate this car, he had to extend the garage and to get the car in. And the car he wanted to import was an American car, DeSoto Fireflight, which sounded very, very fancy. You know, DeSoto Fireflight sounds wonderful, doesn't it? And but he couldn't import that, Morris told me, so he managed with a Ford Fairlane, which is a bit smaller, which also had big fins on, but it still looked rather gorgeous. But I thought, I'm going to get my own back on this, so I did. So I went to buy a DeSoto Fireflight of my own, and here it is. Isn't that fantastic? Look at those fins on the back of that. Look at that. How about that, eh? And it's duotone, red stripe down the side and the front there. Fantastic. Imagine that tearing around in Hollywood, shooting out of the window. And I also got another car. And this one is even better than this. Is a Cadillac Eldorado DeVille drop head. How about that? That's the business, isn't it? The fins on that and a little kick at the back. Cars like the DeSoto Fireflight would feature in Highway Patrol, usually Dodgers, the police cars were Dodgers. But DeSotos as well, and but occasionally you would have a fancy car like a Cadillac, and it was usually driven by, when you saw it driving along with a pork pie hat on, you knew at the start of the show, you knew on a country road or in the desert or something, you knew that it was probably being driven by either a rich guy who was about to get sort of, you know, stopped and robbed, or or it was driven by a man and a woman, and the woman was usually a siren, something of a siren, and they were up to no good, so they were driving around in something like this, you see, and the whole thing was terrific. And in England there weren't any cars like this, and that's probably why Mr. Walmsley wanted a proper American car, except there were two manufacturers who made cars that looked a bit like American cars in the 1950s, and they were American-owned manufacturers. One was Ford, of course, and the other was General Motors, which was sold in this country as Vauxhall. And the cars they made were like Vauxhall made something called, for example, a Vauxhall Cresta. When it was driven faster, the speedometers changed colour. I was very envious of that, and that had wings on and so. And then Ford, of course, had the Zephyr Zodiacs with their little fins on the back. But the thing about them was, with the like shrunken American cars, it was as though, and I was reminded of this in that film came out called Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. It was as though somebody had said, Honey, I Shrunk the Cars. And when Americans came to this country in the 50s and early 60s, they must have seemed rather strange to see fully grown adults driving around in basically dinky toys. Well, it wasn't long before Britain got into the act of the Highway Patrol Act with a show, a police show about police who were driving around in police cars, and it was called Z cars, or Z cars they call it in America, and it was a terrific show. The difference was I was older by the time this came out, and the plots you could see were much more sophisticated, the acting was better, but the cars weren't as good. But do you remember this? Theme tune to Z cars. Today, you can't get Z cars. I haven't been able to try and get hold of it on a DVD, but I've got a box set of Highway Patrol, and I watch this usually on my own. Nobody else wants to watch it. And I sent a set to my brother. He enjoys it as well. He probably watches it on his own, I should think, as well. Here it is. Here's one of the things. There's Broderick Crawford as Captain Dan Matthews, and there's a fantastic, see, Dodge police car. Isn't that great? And well, the scripts, as I say, you could say they were plodding plots, and you always feel as though when I watch it I know exactly what's going to happen next, and of course it does, but it's rather comforting at this time, because we'd all rather like to know what's going to happen next, wouldn't we?